just simply by the stroke of a pen, move from 12 to 15 seats, and also at the same time disenfranchised the assemblymen who were elected and took away their rights and so on and on. Why did your government do that?
Darien,
according to the leader of the opposition.
Which is very, very unfortunate. And I wouldn't spend too much time speaking about how surprised I am at the type of interest that Kamala Persad-Bissessar, leader of the opposition, and the UNC is now all of a sudden interested in this matter when they have been for the past years, decades, trying to distance themselves from Tobago and standing up against anything that was developed to advance the cause of Tobago and Tobagonians. So at the end of the day, this is a legal issue that requires a legal response. This didn't happen by the stroke of a pen. I must say I'm very amazed by the type of intellectual gymnastics that I am seeing displayed by those opposite, both in the PDP and the UNC, and even the intellectuals who call themselves independent from time to time. I think that's a push to advance their agenda. At the end of the day, from the time this whole deadlock happened, everybody has said we have to get the Parliament to step in. It cannot be solved at the level of the Assembly because the standing orders doesn't permit anything further than keep on coming back to vote.
So then why are some Tobagonians advocating that this problem is a Tobago problem and should be resolved in Tobago, and let the two teams sit down and trash it out and trash it out?
Then take us to the law that tells us that. We have to implement a solution that is both legal and democratic. I'll tell you something, Darien. When this legislation was crafted, we are now operating on Act number 40 of 1996. You also had Act number 39 of 1996, which dealt specifically with the Constitution. Act number 40 deals with the Tobago House of Assembly Act. During the course of that debate, the independents were saying, what if there's a tie? You had Dr. Easton Mackenzie asking, what if there's a tie? But at that point in time, we had only one PNM assemblyman in the Tobago House of Assembly, and nobody envisaged there ever being a tie or even the PNM coming to win the election. Even in 2013, in January 2013, when the UNC government, of which Delmon Baker and Vanella served as members of the cabinet, and even the assemblyman for Bethel Mount Irvin right now, Mr. Terence Baines, he served as a UNC government senator.
That's the first time I heard that.
Yeah, and I'm saying they were sitting there, they were part of the cabinet, they were part of the discussions. And Dr. Rowley would have mentioned in his position as MP for Diego Martin West and opposition leader, he said, we need to cater for if there is a tie. And the response from Delmon Baker said, that would never happen. That would not happen. We don't foresee a tie. A matter of fact, we see the TOP taking all the seats. And you would recall that 2013 election, the PNM came out and took all 12 seats because we stood up against the fact that the UNC was disrespecting Tobagonians and or Tobago House of Assembly. And in addition to that, all our conversations and our concerns based on the internal self-government bill, those were ignored by the UNC, and they brought their own green paper. I remember moving back home in 2008, and by that time, the Tobago House of Assembly of the led by Orville London in the majority and Ho Choi Charles and Ashwood Jack in the minority. And we decided to speak to Trinidad with one voice. So we started consultations with the John Prince Committee.
Yes,
in 2007,
yeah.
They would have done consultations throughout Tobago. In addition to that, you had the contributions from Reginald Dumas in the Calder Hall Accord. You had Deborah Moore McGinns and Christo Gift, who had the consensus of the Constitution. So all of this is based on the liberation of Tobagonians. The John Prince Committee helped to bring that together so that we could have something to present to the then cabinet led by Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar. And that was ignored in...
what do you mean it was ignored?
Because we presented our position to the the then Prime Minister, asking her to take it to Cabinet. She and her team decided that they would bring their own bill to the House in January of 2013. So they ignored the John Prince report. They ignored the contributions that came out, the 40-something consultations. Yes, and they went to the Parliament in January, mere 5 days before the election. It was January 16th they went to the Parliament with this bill, allowing no time for consultation, allowing no time for a joint select committee or anything of that sort. A matter of fact, leading up to that time in about July and May of 2012, you had Mr. Orville London writing over and over to the UNC asking, could you please give us an air? Writing to the Prime Minister. And we have to remember that the Tobago House of Assembly Act provides for the Prime Minister to meet with the Chief Secretary regularly on matters relating to Tobago. And you had Mr. Orville London at that time literally begging. Yes, after that bill didn't pass in January 2013, it never came back as part of their legislative agenda. It died. But
then they were in government until 2015.
Exactly. So we need to ask people like Vanilla Allen-Toppin, Delman Baker, who are members of the cabinet of that UNC government, and Terence Baines, who is now Assemblyman for Bethel Mount Irving, who ran on the PDP ticket. They sat there comfortably as a part of that cabinet and a part of those deliberations. So from 2013 to 2015, the bill died. But let's remember also that Ho-Choi Charles came to Orville London in 2013 after the bill of January it wasn't passed. And we came up with the position as Tobagonians, we need to speak to Trinidad with one voice. Because the UNC was making it out at that time like, it's the PNM, it's Orville, keep on writing again. If you search the internet, you would see newspaper headlines like Orville writes again. And it was a sort of joke of him continuing to write the Prime Minister, trying to get her attention. And Ho-Choi Charles approached Orville London and said, you know what? If we're going to get our voices heard, we have to speak to Trinidad with one voice. Not PNM, not Orville, not Tobago Platform of Truth, that was Ho-Choi's party, not Ho-Choi Charles. They even invited Ashwood Jack, and Ashwood Jack was a part of that meeting. Yeah, so that is where the Tobago Forum of Parties came, and we journeyed throughout Tobago, and even in Trinidad came down to UA and did consultations so that we could come up with a position to give to the Parliament. And when Dr. Rowley won the elections, he agreed to accept the bill from the Tobago House of Assembly. Let's remember, it was passed in the Tobago House of Assembly unanimously. And if you check the newspaper records, you would see where the T.H.A. was inviting people to come and be a part of the consultation.
Let's go back there.
I was a part of the consultation.
When you said it was passed in the Tobago House of Assembly unanimously, what that mean? It was
at that point in time, we were 12-0. Okay. But even before that, let's remember the consultations where we went throughout Tobago and also in Trinidad. I remember when we were at Signal Hill Senior Comprehensive, there were over 600 people there. I remember meetings starting at Mason Hall Government School, 6 p.m. And we didn't leave Mason Hall until after 11. It was Tobagonians from all backgrounds, all areas of life who came out to have their voices heard in those consultations. So this is our bill. So that 15 seats, that's our position. That's not Orville position or the PNM position. That's not Ho-Choi position or platform. That is a Tobago position where everybody came out and say, these are our demands or dreams or aspirations. Please present them to the Parliament and get it done as our voice, the Tobagonian voice. So that 15 seats,
where are we with that?
That's our position.
When that was in 2016?
Right. So in 2016, in the end of 2016, which would have been around December 2016, the bill was submitted to the cabinet. Yes, accepted. We didn't change a comma. Yes, we accepted it wholly from the Tobago House of Assembly. Remember, January 2017, there was an election. So we didn't pursue it in that month because we didn't want it to look like an election scamming Mama Gang, the people of Tobago. Then we, as a cabinet, not just the members from Tobago, all the other members from Trinidad had to digest it. So I think we would have used much of 2017 talking with the Tobago Forum of Parties and digesting it among ourselves as the cabinet so we could all say this is our position. In March of 2018, a joint select committee was formed. yes, so that we could go through it and we could get some level of consensus in this position.
That Joint Select Committee?
The Joint Select...
Who comprised that?
The Joint Select Committee was comprised of... I had been a part of the Joint Select Committee in 2018. Camille Robinson-Regis was there too. I remember Ramona Ramdial being a part of that one. Also in Rudin Dar Singh also being a part of that. I remember Fitzgerald Hines being a part of that. And then after that, Parliament died. So we had our meetings. We had been interacting and engaging the United Nations, the European Union, the government of St. Kitts, the government of Tanzania.
Why?
Because remember the Tobago people presented their raw ideas to us with some drafting and legalese from Russell Martino, of course. And we wanted to be able to develop it in the form of bills, because this legislation or their proposals would affect the Constitution, the Tobago House of Assembly Act, the EBC Act, the Representation of the People Act, and so on. So we have to form this thing into, we have to do our research, because let's say there were points of unicameral versus bicameral chamber. There are different positions. Do the necessary research and then explain to the people. We came back to the people in June of 2018. We did a consultation in Tobago. People like Vanis James showed up and gave his opinion. People like Fali Augustine showed up. Jason Atta. A number of Tobagonians showed up and gave their opinions and sent us back to go ahead and continue doing more deliberation, more research. So when the Parliament lapsed in... When the Parliament came to a close in July, August of 2020, right before the election, we did what was necessary to save the work so that we can use that work and use that research in the 12th Parliament. So if you go on the Parliament website, you'll see the 11th report and all the contributions from the stakeholders. We invited comments and positions from everybody. You could submit by email, through the social media page, and so on. And interesting, all this noise that the PDP is making up and down in Tobago, they did not submit a position,
Well, I was going to ask you that in terms of, because you went through pains to highlight just how inclusive all the consultations was. Like you have, the people coming and voicing their views, and so I'm trying to figure out why is it that they still making noise.
I'll tell you, if there is any piece of legislation that was consultative in this country, it is that bill that is before the Parliament, because you went through Reginald Dumas, and I remember when Reginald Dumas came and presented his work and wanted his work to be a part of what we were doing, and that was included. Yes, we did the consultations, the records on the Parliament would show so, and we are still meeting.
Why is it taking so long?
Why is it taking so long? I think that this is the most attention this bill has gotten, to the point that we had a Joint Select Committee doing this type of investigation. In the past, it has been used as a political football. In the past, I don't think that we got the level of sensitivity from central government. So sometimes we blame central government in Trinidad, that Trinidad is not listening to Tobago. But I think that we in Tobago also have to take the responsibility that different people were trying to own the process. To say TOP give Tobago internal self-government, PNM give Tobago platform of truth, and people were trying to own it. It wasn't until we decided in March 2013 to speak to Trinidad with one voice as the Tobago platform of political parties, and have Tobago explain this thing to Tobagonians so they could own and embrace it. So you had school children, senior citizens, everybody knew about it, and you could follow the debate and the conferences and the consultations around Tobago and listen on the radio and really connect with it. I remember following consultation to consultation, sitting next to Crystal Gift, sitting next to Deborah Mormigans, and really I felt proud of it, and I feel a part of this bill that we have submitted to the Parliament. I feel like this is our voice. This is the Tobago people voice. So how dare anybody question that voice to say, oh, we're not being fair by saying 15. This is what we requested.
So that's
matter of
15.
fact,
That's
no,
15.
no, wait, let me say something else. When we wrote to the EBC in 2018, I pulled up the letter this morning in the Parliamentary rotunda. You know, I was just going back in the archives, looking at the pictures and looking at the journey. And I remember when we wrote to the EBC in 2018, the EBC responded saying, in order for us to make this change to 15 seats, we would have to, the act would have to be amended, and then we will do our work. So the people of Tobago, in that this document submitted to the Parliament based on all consultations representing the dreams, the desires, the aspirations and the demands of the Tobago people, we requested 15 seats. And when we said, okay, we have to go back to the polls, to put us in a position where they would be less likely a tie.
Right.
Yes. So therefore, we're going with an odd number. What is the odd number? Should it be 13? Should it be 15? Should it be 17? Should it be 19? Who's going to determine that? Who better to determine that than the people of Tobago, who would have already conducted their consultations and say this is what we want? In addition to that, people are saying, no, we don't want to hear about this bill that you're talking about. Bring the internal self-government bill. But if you really know what's in the internal self-government bill, that's 15 seats in the internal self-government bill.
So that was pulled out of a hat anyway.
But it wasn't pulled out of a hat. That was part of the conversation. That is the position, the unanimous position submitted on behalf of the people of Tobago from the Tobago House of Assembly to the Parliament. We did consultations. We opened up for public comments and so on. So this had been on the table in Tobago since as early as 2015 and thereabout, when the debates and the consultations took place. And that is what was submitted to the Parliament in 2016, and it's now before the JSC in 2018. And as a member of the JSC, that is where we still are.
And I want to get back to the point you made, because I know people have been talking about bringing the autonomy bill to the Parliament. So are you, in essence, saying that this 15-seat move is part of the, I guess, the progression?
Of course.
Part of that bill. So in other words, when you're calling for the bill, the autonomy bill, basically this is part of it. So
exactly. So when you say, oh, we need consultation on this, we have already had consultation on this. And to try to imply that this is not the voice of Tobagonians, then it would be imputing the integrity of people like Dr. Easton Mackenzie, Dr. Prince, Crystal Gift, Deborah Moore McGinnis, everybody who contributed, even the average layman in Tobago who contributed and was at the different consultations and conferences. When we say we the people, this is not all the London's document. This is we the people's document.
So you just brought a little clarity here to something. It means then that the Tobago bill, the Tobago House of Assembly was formed was validated in the Parliament in the first instance.
Right, a draft bill in the Tobago House of Assembly.
No, the existing bill it came into existence through parliamentary process. So therefore, anything that has to be done, even the amendment to the number of seats, has to be done in the Parliament. It can't be done in the Assembly.
And we knew from the get-go it couldn't be done from the any amendment to the Tobago House of Assembly Act. If you go back in our history, we can only do it from the level of the Parliament until that internal self-government is granted, and then Tobago could make its own laws. That is part of what we're asking for. And I want to say that this bill, the internal self-government bill, is not replaced by this consequential amendment to deal with the deadlock. I saw a flyer being passed around being circulated by the PDP on Monday saying Tobago asks to be able to make its own law. We ask for economic independence. We ask for this, we ask for that, but all we're getting is 15 seats. And I know that is deliberate, it is mischievous, and it miseducates people who depend on those who know better. The PDP knows better, because we have been saying from day one, yes, the internal self-government bill is before the Joint Select Committee. The Joint Select Committee came and did its consultations and so on, and we've been reporting. So to try to fool the Tobagonians into believing that we ask for X, Y, and Z, and all we're getting is A, knowing very well that the bill, the substantial bill, the ISG bill, the internal self-government bill, is before the Joint Select Committee, and we would have recently asked for an extension up to May. And I feel confident that we have saved enough work, done enough work, and we continue to meet to continue to develop the legislation. You have to remember what we received from the House of Assembly is a document that shows amendment to the Constitution. Of course, you cannot seat everything in the Constitution, so we now have to go through and say, okay, this would be better suited in the T.H.A. Act. This would affect the EBC Act. This would affect the Representation of the People Act. We have to go through, do the necessary consultation.
Who comprise the Joint Select Committee?
The Joint Select Committee at this point in time is made up of members of the government, members of the independent, and members of the opposition. It's a joint select committee so that we could get some kind of level of consensus and go through it so that it wouldn't be done across the floor like was done in 1990, where recommendations were being made to the then Attorney General, and he's saying, nah, that's not our policy. We wouldn't consider that. If there's a problem, we'll come back to Parliament. That's what they kept saying in 1990. And even Kamala Prasad Bisesa, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa, the leader of the opposition, she was then in the cabinet, and she said, remember, this is a living, breathing thing. We are going to come back, and as changes are required, we're going to come back to the Parliament and do what's necessary. How did that change now? So we took the position as the government, rather than to sit and expect a gentleman's agreement to come about, because they had been, the elected members of the Assembly had been to the House at least three times,
yeah.
And there's nothing gentlemanly about what's taking place. It's just a whole lot of, you have the PDP stirring up hate and sowing seeds of discord and trying to incite civil unrest, and that cannot be healthy for Tobago or for Trinidad and Tobago. There are people who are coming about saying, oh, pull a straw, do this, do that. It's not based on your feelings. It's based on what is within the law. And even when Fahali had said, oh, the PDP has the popular vote, let us lead. I am glad, but the law doesn't provide for popular vote.
Yeah.
And I am glad when we found out the day after, the PNM found out that we have the popular vote, Dr. Rowley or the PNM in Tobago, we didn't say, well, we have the popular vote, then let's lead. We know that it was not legal to do so. We have to do what's legal, and we have to do what upholds the principles of democracy.
Does Tobagonians generally understand this? Because a lot of the voices coming from Tobago, whether they are PDP, whether they are so-called independent political analysts or economists and all of that, they're giving you the impression that we don't really need to go through all them hoops you're talking about.
Because some of these people have an agenda. Some of these people have an agenda that they think it is their time, or they need to be given a chance because the PNM had been there long enough. This is not about chances. We have to honor the voice and the desire of the Tobago people. They voted 6-6. No 6 is bigger than the other 6. Usually, based on the standing orders before us, the members of the House have to elect the presiding officer. The presiding officer in the T.H.A. is a very powerful position. That presiding officer could break the vote. Yes,
right. Because they have a casting vote.
Right. So we, as assemblymen, we have to deliberate who presides over our business, not the president.
You said something. All 6 is 6. There's no bigger 6.
That's right.
But there are those in Tobago who feel because 6 belong to the PNM is in government in Trinidad, and therefore a PNM Prime Minister and Attorney General making it sound like if them 6 more important than the other 6.
How?
And they're consulting with the Chief Secretary, who is a PNM.
Let's wait right there. The Tobago House of Assembly Act provides, just like I mentioned to you before when Mr. Orville London was writing to Kamala over and over, to Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa over and over again, asking, can we meet, please? The Tobago House of Assembly Act requires for the Prime Minister to meet with the Chief Secretary. It didn't mention anybody else.
The Assemblyman?
Not even the Assemblyman. To meet with the Chief Secretary regularly on matters relating to Tobago. And that is no matter what color you are, whether you're NJAC, your UNC, your PNM, your PDP. Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa, UNC had to meet with the chief secretary, even though that wasn't her color. Yes, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, in his capacity as Prime Minister, has to meet with chief secretary, no matter what color that person is. And that was done to insulate the Tobago House of Assembly from the interference of central government and from the interference of any political party. That the head of the central government meet regularly with the head of the Tobago House of Assembly. And even right now in the proposals before Parliament, it is being proposed, and rather than saying regularly, because your regular and my regular might be different, what was proposed to the Parliament in this bill is to meet quarterly.
You know what I'm curious about, Slim and Minister? Why will they come up with this 15?
Well, and I was about to say, I know in the Parliament, I know in the Parliament they would have one of the opposition MPs would have raised the point, and somebody here when we were doing the text would say, now, okay, 15, suppose it is 5. So what's a third force?
And why did the government come up with that 15?
The government did not come up with 15.
Was the government who come up with 15?
The government went ahead with what is already in train in the internal self-government, the Tobago Constitution Amendment Bill for internal self-government. That is what was presented to us on behalf of the people of Tobago.
So who recommend that to the government?
We are going with what we were already in train. That is the people's voice. There's no better way to be fair and effective than to honor the voice of the people. You would have mentioned something. What if there's a tie 555? And I heard Fali would have mentioned that too. That is why the consequential amendment that was recently proposed to the House of Representatives last Friday didn't just speak to 15 seats. It also spoke to if the members of the House of the Tobago House of Assembly assemblymen are unable to come to an agreement or come to a position to properly constitute the assembly, that is with presiding officer, deputy presiding officer, and the councillors and so on, then the chief secretary, along with the prime minister and the president, would consult for going back to the polls. Because let me tell you something. It could happen another way too. It could happen where one side gets 7, the other one gets 7, and an independent like a Dr. Angus gets
who could decide?
1. You understand what I'm saying? So no matter, even here in Trinidad right now as we speak with 41 seats, what if the UNC gets 20, the PNM gets 21, and an independent
and so he not going with anybody.
1, and he not going with anybody. So there must be some sort of provision within the law to allow us to go back to the polls so that the voice of the people reigns. I want to speak on that because asking the president to choose your presiding officer, knowing that the presiding officer has this casting vote, after you do that, right? After you've done that, when you vote in for a chief secretary, depending on the presiding officer breaking vote,
6-6.
we don't vote for her. We don't vote for the presiding officer. And then when you're asking for the deputy presiding officer, the deputy chief secretary to come from among the elected members, you're going to have a 6-6 break there too. And then which one of the 6s would be the majority 6 to have 3 councillors while the minority 6 has 1 councillor? So you tied up. It's confusion all angles. So the best thing to do is allow the people to speak. How could that be undermining democracy? When you allow the people to go back to the polls and speak. And I think that the PDP's chances are as good as the PNM chances because we go back from scratch. And the voice, if the people of Tobago want to vote out the PNM, they would do so. And if the people of Tobago want to vote in the PDP, they would do so. And if they change their mind about either, they would do so. But let the people speak. I think it's important that the people must be given the opportunity to exercise their democratic right rather than asking somebody else to do it for us. So that's why we're back to this. I think it's
important because, you know, why are we in this whole mess in the first place? Because the PDP doesn't want to go back to the polls. So I think it's important going forward, as the minister mentioned, that there's something in the rules and laws. Because as we know, up to now, it's saying basically they should set that in the T.H.A. between each other, and that is not happening. So as the new bill is proposing that there is something in it, as you mentioned, like a tiebreaker, they say, so you know what to do. If should we in any form or fashion end up in this kind of situation again, you don't have to worry about why Parliament jumping in. There's something they're saying, all right, this is what we have to do. So to solve it, prevent it from happening in the future, have something in there.
I want to go to the lines to get our callers in. They could call us at 622-397, but I want to ask you a question. In your constituency of Tobago West, not everybody's paying him, right? But you have to serve everybody.
That's
So
right.
you're interacting with everybody. Are constituents of yours Tobagonians? Do they want independence from Trinidad? They don't want internal self-government. They don't want more autonomy. They just want a clean break.
No.
Are you finding that?
That is not so. And that is not just coming from me in my capacity a member of Parliament for Tobago West. I was a part of these consultations, and I'm always excited and happy to see that. I moved back home in 2008, and I went to the consultations. I spent my time doing that. I was doing research for Frank Roberts, research for Huey Cadet. I followed this thing from consultation to even when we came to Trinidad to speak to the Trinidadians at UE, I was there.
Did
I
you speak
followed
to
the thing
Tobagonians
around.
here?
We spoke to Tobagonians here and even Trinidadians. And I'll tell you something, Tobagonians throughout the years have said, we do not want secession. We want to be on equal footing. We want to be equally respected. We want to be able to be man in our own yard.
Let's take our first
and control our own business.
Good morning and welcome.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
I'm testimony to attending those consultations.
Nice.
So when Trinidadians say, like it's a Tobagonian thing, Trinidadian had the opportunity to participate in that discussion in Trinidad and in Tobago. So putting it on as a Tobago thing, I think it was well consulted and it was well presented.
Thank you for your call, caller.
A caller, Miguel asking, why let's take out the 15 part 4? And why it already didn't just present the Tobago Autonomy Bill and done and get rid of this old T.H.A. Act? Like we just fix it on time.
As I said before, there's still work to be done on the bill, on the internal self-government bill, and I think that the committee has gotten to such a good place where we would have done consultations and engaged UN and so on and gotten their position, and there's still some work to be done. Do you want to sit around and wait for the work to be done while Tobago keep on striking
but
and
MP,
that type of thing?
I don't think that Tobagonians understand the breadth of work that is required to come up with the right type of legislation that will give Tobago that governance structure that is critical in any situation. I'm not sure that they understand.
Because people who know better are deliberately misleading them and taking advantage of their lack of knowledge on the situation. And you have to ask yourself, is that good leadership? As a leader, it is your business to educate the masses and then let them make the decision that is in their best interest. Not mislead the people and lie to them.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning to you and
Hey, morning.
Darien
Morning.
Minister Cudjoe.
Good morning.
One of the problems in Tobago that Tobagonians are looking at, one is the economic zone, right? With the sea and other things. Why the 11 miles? Why we didn't look at the whole bill and have it done? 2, how do you think after Friday the other race, how do you think they'll feel about what you said, that they have something in the bar? They have membership in Smokey and Bunty and Frankie's. Mm-hmm. Do you really think that the Indians in the
No. You're heading down a direction. I never mentioned anything about Indians. You have your own agenda this morning.
No, I don't have any agenda.
Okay, so did you hear me mention the name Indians?
No, you talk about Smokey and Bunty.
Yes, and I want you to say exactly what I said.
Yeah. How do you think the children in those constituencies will feel about what was said?
Well, I'm trying to figure out where the race
allow me to respond. Allow me to respond. I said what I said on Friday, and I would say it again. In this day and age, in a modern democracy, how could we, as a modern, forward-thinking people, accept that type of worthless and irresponsible legal advice to draw straws? to draw lots after so many years of going to the polls and having our voices heard and dipping our fingers in the ink and saying who we want to be leaders and what policy we want to direct us as Tobagonians, as Trinbagonians. Why must anybody accept legal opinion that says pull straws or the ideas or the feel? This is not about feelings. It's about doing what is legal. And anything in 2021 that speaks to pulling straws, or you feel we should do this or you feel we should do that, that advice had to have come from some bar somewhere.
And I was about to ask you that because I know the opposition would have threatened legal action about this whole Tobago deadlock. And I'm about to ask you, is what the government doing legal? Quite frank, because if I would think that if they're threatening to go to the court, then there must be some kind of.
Then let them go to the court. The government, the Parliament has called upon to step in. There's nobody else that could have changed the law for us to allow an uneven number, because even the PDP had said we have to go back to the polls. We have to ask the Parliament to step in. Yes, very early. Even opposition leader Kamala Prasad-Bisesa had said that too. You had Martin George, constitutional lawyer, coming out and saying that too. So we know you had Ho Choi Charles coming out and saying that too. Yes? Who else would make the law? Not the Parliament. Yeah?
Let's take a call. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Welcome.
Ms. Cudjoe, let me tell you that I am totally impressed with you.
Thank you.
Contribution on Friday, the issue with the bar, I did have a feeling with it. Let me ask you something. The issue of the Tobago House of Assembly, the Autonomy Bill, is there anything that exists in that bill that deals with how Tobago's patrimony is to be dealt with? Example, how the land is to be disposed or dealt with, how Tobago's buildings are to be dealt with, or even Studley Park. Because I'm not going to lie to you, I am having some misgivings and this sudden interest of UNC with regards to Tobago and Tobago East. Is there anything in the bill that treats with how those things are to be dealt with in its entirety? Thank you.
Well, the legislation before us provides for the resources of the Tobago to be under the watch of the Tobago House of Assembly for the most part. So I think the Studley Park quarry would fall under that too, under the remit of the Tobago House of Assembly where it already is. We have to, if we're asking for internal self-government, we have to equip ourselves to properly manage our business, and then we have to trust each other, no matter which party wins, in managing that business.
Let me call out the names of the people on that Jones-led committee. Chairmanship, which was they were elected, Camille Robinson Regis, Mr. Foster Cummings, Faris Alwari, Shamfa Cudjoe, Rudanat Indar Singh, Dinesh Rambali, Jerlyn John, Nigel De Freitas, Clarence Rambarat, Ms. Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal, Dr. Maria Dillon Remy, and Dr. Varma Dial Singh. Now, I want to make this observation. Well, Foster Cummings feels he's a Tobagonian, but he's not. Shamfa Cudjoe, Tobagonian.
Nigel De Freitas,
Jerlyn John,
Dr. Maria Dillon Remy. She's an independent senator, Tobagonian also.
So it have 1, 2, 3, 4 Tobagonians sitting on this committee, 4, the opposition of a Tobagonian, the independents of a Tobagonian. The government has two Tobagonians.
Yes, Ms. Cudjoe and
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you can't describe Ms. Camille Robinson Regis as a Tobagonian too, because Regis family, Tobagonian people.
Somebody asked Ms. Cudjoe a bit, just as he mentioned Mrs. Robinson Regis, his name. I know you can't give personal detail, but how is she doing? Somebody asked her, if you've been in contact with how is she, health-wise, is she coming along?
We spoke just this morning, and she's doing well. Okay,
somebody in the WhatsApp asked her, so I pose the question to you just to kind of get an update on how she's doing.
But Darien, there's one thing we didn't touch on, and this is something that made me very uncomfortable. The EBC. I hear many people questioning the EBC will cut up the seats in Tobago West, or the EBC would do something that would give the PNM an advantage. And I think that is a very dangerous and damaging position for the UNC, the PDP, and anybody to push
How
The
did
EBC
come in
had
this?
been, because you've been hearing the comments about we are
opportunity-
trying to
yeah.
utilize this legislation to give the PNM an advantage and what the EBC would do and so on. Now, the Election and Boundaries Commission has been an independent body from day one. Yes, and it is respected all around the world, and especially throughout the Commonwealth, for its professionalism and its integrity and its independence. Over the years, we've had independent observers from throughout the Commonwealth and so on coming to observe our election and have always given us a very clean bill of health. Over the years, when the UNC, the ULF, anybody challenge the EBC, they've always been found wanting at the level of the court. They will lose. Yes? And it is interesting to say, when the UNC just took Arima Central from the PNM in the local government election, nobody had a problem with the EBC.
EBC was
No,
fine.
they commended the EBC.
They commended the EBC in Arima Central. So I don't like this posturing and this position of questioning
putting
the
families that work in
integrity
the
and the
EBC.
independence of the
Yeah.
EBC. The EBC has worked for us well, and they have their parameters. They have their guidelines that they operate by. And it's not anything new to them, and we have to trust that they are able to
As
do
we're
their
wrapping
work.
up, MP, Minister, when will this joint select committee work end? Is there a deadline? Is there a perimeter for that to end? I don't know what is the next step if you're going to go back out and do more consultation based on the final document and then bring to Parliament. What are the timelines?
I know we're going to go back to do consultation, because after we consulted in 2018, in June 2018, we were asked to do some research and engage the UN and so on and some other matters. We have to, of course, report back to the people and have them give their final say. At the end of the day, it's not about unanimity, it's about consensus. You'll never get everybody to agree, but we want to get to a place where we could sufficiently say we have honored the dreams of the Tobagonian, the aspirations, and it's about time. The committee's current deadline is May 31st, and I feel confident that we are going to get to that.
And then what?
And then we could return to the parliamentary floor. We return to the parliamentary floor for debate and allow us to vote.
Majority or 5/8 majority?
It's a 3/4
simple?
majority, and of course, we only have 22 seats in the House. You require 31 seats, so you're gonna 31 votes. So you're gonna need some support from the opposition, and in the Senate you're going to need some support we're going to need some support from the opposition and the independents, and that's why I'm hoping at the level of the Joint Select Committee we could get to some good place of consensus, really go through and deliberate and massage all the issues, so when we get to the parliamentary floor we are comfortable enough to say yes, we can join the 22 members of the PNM to grant Tobago internal self-government. I really hope that the UNC and the independents would rise to the occasion when
Minister
that time
Shamfa
comes.
Cudjoe, thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you.
For
Thank you,
coming and
Minister.
sitting with us and having this discussion. I hope the conversation continues.